entering the veil, entering the veil. It's the bread of adversity, we made the whole. What do you do when you realize the world's so cold? There's a path called righteousness, but it's littered with snares. Approach with caution, a weak feel, it's God's hands to break. Falling away, got us going astray. We in the valley of decision, help us find our way. My people destroyed for a lack of knowledge. How can that be? Mama spent 30 grand on college. The inner man in us seeks for greatness, but truth is like a gem hidden in the field, it's evasive. Who will prevail to open up the book? Who will excel into the veil and take a look? To those that have an ear, let them hear. Blindness and part has happened to us, but clear vision is near, man. We are entering the veil. Take hold, we are entering the veil.
Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Entering the Veil. The veil represents the separation between the holy and the most holy. Although the veil was torn in two, a separation still exists to this day due to our falling away from the sound doctrine originally delivered unto us via the Holy Bible. What this means is there is now a spiritual veil over the eyes and ears of the general public, causing a separation where none should exist. We are committed to helping guide as many people as possible along the spiritual path of entering the veil. Black women, Israelite princesses, have always been the voice of our nation due to our strength and determination in spite of the male-dominated society from which we came. But during colonial slavery, the white woman, the Southern belle, was exalted as the epitome of beauty and true womanhood, which automatically cast the black woman into a lowered, devalued state merely on the basis of her skin color, which was further justified by her status as a slave. Slavery inbred that perception into our daughters by supplying them with white dolls with blonde hair and blue eyes with which to play. And our daughters are still choosing white dolls as better than black today. With the birth of television came blaxploitation, with stereotypes and images of black women as sapphire, sassy, disrespectful, sensual, and deceitfully cunning, and sometimes not so bright. On the other hand, the stereotype of Mammy, the strong and tough female slave, was promoted as the ideal slave who nurtured and raised her master's children without complaint while managing the daily burdens of the plantation home. We often speak of the effects of their Willie Lynch programming on black men and their desire for this taboo trophy wife or idol. But we fail to examine how these stereotypes have also affected the psyche, confidence, and self-esteem of black women. The United Congregation of Israel presents Destruction of the Black Family, Part 2, The Black Female. Black women have juggled the insurmountable roles of womanhood as wife, mother, caregiver, lover, counselor, and even breadwinner, but they also had to do it while dodging the barriers of race, class, and gender. Part of the black woman's strength has been her beauty and difference in the world, just as she was created to be. Her intelligence gave her access to the power of Gentile men, which many black women use to elevate their families and black men to a higher plateau in life.
And the Adonai Elohim said, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make an helpmeet for him." Genesis chapter 2, verse 18.
Even though those barriers continue to litter our path, black women have pressed on, scaling heights and changing even what is fashionable in America and around the world.
The Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered before the midwives come in unto them. Exodus chapter 1, verse 19.
But today's newly formulated independent black woman was never the intent or the proper model for the role of women. A product of the social ills and ethnic stereotypes of chattel slavery, the independent black woman is actually like a glass of lemonade, both sour and sweet, just like the drink. Nowhere is the rise in power and presence of black women more evident than in the public sector of politics. Already affected by the brainwashing we received during slavery, efforts began to elevate our people through the politics of respectability, through the women's movement in the Black Baptist Church, 1880 through 1920. This was the promotion of temperance, cleanliness of person and property, thrift, polite manners, and sexual purity, which are oddly familiar to the virtues named in Scripture.
The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 through 23.
Our uplift politics involved the reform of individual behavior aimed at Black Americans who were encouraged to be respectable, and white people whom they thought needed to be shown that we could be respectable. It was on the platform of politics that the civil rights movement spread to school campuses for students and to the ghetto for urban so-called blacks. Raising the consciousness of our people was championed by black women through rap groups, which blamed their experience with prejudice on the attitudes from the social structure that molded them from birth. The groups determined that black women were so denigrated in society that they had already developed prejudices against themselves and other black women. Degenerating into complaining sessions, the groups became divided into two factions with more political emphasis. One was the Black Power movement, which was soon mimicked by white females who formed the second one, the Women's Liberation Movement. Virtually all laws classified people by gender and defined women's rights and responsibilities by her position in the family as a wife and mother. The Equal Pay Act in 1963 and laws against sex discrimination in 1964 began to erase these definitions so that most such laws are unconstitutional today. Now look at the condition of our women. The colonial attacks against our ethnicity during slavery not only placed our men in a dead last status in this society, but they deeply wounded our women in the arena of self-esteem. With the misconception of good hair that dates back to the days of American slavery, when European culture and standards of beauty were used to disparage the self-esteem of black women have now become slaves to weaves and perms. We found false beauty in assimilation, spending countless dollars on relaxers and weaves. In an attempt to look more like the women who exemplify American beauty, truly we have drenched ourselves in a web of lies that have us spending money we don't have and using toxic chemicals to attain an artificial sense of self-esteem. According to CNN Health, weaves and braids contribute to a type of permanent hair loss that appears to be common among black women. Called alopecia, this is a form of baldness that begins at the crown of the head and leads to scarring of the scalp. Hair relaxers contain several corrosive chemicals like ammonia that break down the hair structure and can damage the scalp by causing chemical burns. These chemicals are also found in liquid drain cleaners and paint thinners, which dry out your hair and make it brittle, which increases breakage and hair loss. Virgins give their hair as a sacrifice to the Hindu god Vishnu and Shiva for health and happiness in their future marriages. Poor female farmers give their hair to increase their chances of having a good harvest. And we wear these sacrifices to false gods on our heads. Using dry razors, temple workers shave these women's heads, bald, collect their locks, and then sort them for sale to major Western hair companies. Not a penny of this highly lucrative operation is awarded to any of these women. Many don't even know that their hair is being sold for profit. While our women had to cope with society's image of them as ugly compared to the beauty of white women, white society has always secretly envied the black woman's eyes, lips, hair, hips, and her strength and power. But our rapid assimilation into white society is confirmed by the staggering statistics on interracial dating, where 73% of all African American and white marriages are black men with white women. In fact, African American men are practically running to marry Hispanic and Asian females as well. One black 27-year-old female commented in this way: "I feel like black men don't have my back as a black woman. I'm unsure of my real value in their lives because there is just such a lack of support from them. Honestly, when I see a black man with a white woman, it reinforces my idea that I'm not good enough and musters up a subconscious anger in a lot of black women that we really don't mean to exemplify." This phenomenon has helped to form the independent black woman who does not remember that her primary reason for being created is to be a helpmeet to a male, regardless of the obstacles.
How long will you go about, O you backsliding daughter? For Yahweh has created a new thing in the earth. A woman shall compass a man. Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 22.
Marriage and the family is viewed as a thing of the past. Women have chosen to stay single, including that do-it-yourself single parenthood family. Even artificial insemination is growing among single black females. Our women have settled for the dating game, but that is mostly what it is, a game. With ratios of 6 times more women to men, fierce competition has promoted an environment of open flirtation in the race to draw men. This is dangerous because the motive behind flirting is to break barriers and push the envelope in relationships that will lead to terribly damaging mistakes like fornication, adultery, and promiscuity. It promotes premature marriage and more often premature commitment, not to mention the emotional ties that leave both parties struggling with lifelong memories of closeness with someone to whom they will never be joined by vows.
What? Know you not that he which is joined to an harlot is one body? For 2, said he, shall be one flesh. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 16.
Christ instructed his disciples to go to great lengths to avoid lust, even in the heart and mind, in Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 29.
And if your right eye offends you, pluck it out and cast it from you. For it is profitable for you that one of your members should perish, and not that your whole body should be cast into hell. Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 29.
Media has played a monumental role in the self-esteem of young African American girls today, such as music videos, commercials, unrealistic top model shows, and fashion magazines. As black consumers, we acknowledge the negativity of blaxploitation in advertising, but we tend to overlook the negative when it comes to rap music and their icons. The music belonged to us and was made by us, for us, until we began to fill it mostly with messages that degrade Black women, Black people, and Black culture, rather than those messages that uplift and inform us as they once did.
The power of life and death lies upon the tongue. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21.
At the turn of the decade, in the 1990s, when more young white teens began to buy our music, they didn't care if the music disrespected Black women or women in general. Our women even rhyme about obtaining cash and gifts for sexual favors or tricking men the way they have seen men trick women. This culture has produced a new breed of women more closely associated to the video woes we see daily. Thus, young Black females tend to think that because the body is young and nubile, it must be pushed up, pressed in, painted on, and packaged to be showcased to the world.
Because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes, walking and mincing as they go, and making a tinkling with their feet, Yahweh will smite with a scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion, and will discover their secret parts. Isaiah chapter 3, verses 16 through 17.
Colonialism and our rapid assimilation into their world through civil rights and women's lib has equally confused both Black men and women, further damaging their self-esteem. The National Association for Self-Esteem indicated that there is a close relationship between low self-esteem and violence, alcoholism, drug abuse, eating disorders, school dropouts, teenage pregnancy, suicide, and low academic achievement. Black females need to take time to understand their own self-image, which only comes with an understanding of who we are as a people, Hebrews, rather than so-called Black people who don't know their own identity or self-value. We must get back to those days when sisters understood that we had to have each other's back. We must get back to our own naturally curly hair as well as our own customs.
Therefore, their days did he consume in vanity, and their years in trouble. When he slew them, then they sought him, and they returned and inquired early after Elohim. And they remembered that Elohim was their rock, and the high Elohim their redeemer. Psalm 78, verse 33 through 35.
Once we understand who we are as a people, it becomes plain that our self-esteem, or strength and power, lies in the Elohim who framed us and chose us as his own, Yahweh Elohim, the Elohim of Israel, and his son, Yeshua the Messiah. Then and only then will we be whole.
For the kingdom of Elohim is not in word, but in power. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 20.
Stand in your power, my sisters. You are Hebrew princesses indeed.
Shalom. It's Isaac and Lael Israel coming at you again from the United Congregation of Israel, dealing with our second portion of destruction of the Black family, dealing more specifically with the Black female. Now, whenever we deal with this subject, we have to mention to people that when we are discussing the Black family, we're not just discussing the Black family here in America. For we know that the transatlantic slave trade is one of the vehicles through which our people was spread across the four corners of the globe. And none of this is more apparent than when we watch the Olympic Games.
Right.
You see all manner of people who look just like us, but when they start talking, you find out that they are from different countries, They speak the different languages, and they have the names that are like the people in that particular country, which is the same thing that our people have here. You have the Smiths, who would be black, and then you have the Smiths, of course, who are white. And of course, that name goes back to the people who owned you. So the same thing that is going on and taking place here in this country with the descendants of slaves are the same things that have taken place with the descendants of slaves in other countries.
Right, and it is the thing where, we acknowledge our people here because it's where we're located, but it's all inclusive. We were spread all across the globe, and we know that that Indian Ocean, that sub-Saharan slave trade was much larger in the Middle East, in Europe, where, many of our people were scattered throughout the Middle East, Europe, and up into Asia and around the globe, really. So we're all inclusive, even though we address our people in the location where we are.
Right. And that's a very important point, because you don't hear many people talking about another portion of that slavery, that there were dispersions of our people even before this transatlantic slave trade. So that was a very good thing to mention. Now we're going to open up today. I want to read something in Isaiah chapter 3, and it really gets down into the description of what our people are encountering, because understand that this book, Isaiah, this is prophecy. This is prophecy being given unto our people. And I know we've been told not to read out of this Old Testament, but you have to understand that there are things in the Old Testament, many things that have not taken place yet. So if you look away from the Old Testament, then it will basically limit your understanding of what has taken place. Isaiah chapter 3 and verse 12. As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, they which lead you cause you to err, and destroy the way of your paths. Now, when we read this, what does that bring to mind?
Actually, it just shows you, first of all, how out of order things really are. Children, are normally taught by the adults, the women, and of course the males are normally the leaders. So in any situation where you have a child who is ruling over adults, and this is the exact situation that our people were in this country, in slavery, during colonial slavery, that is most out of order. And of course, the women of the household, the plantation house, were the ones who were over us, as well as, that plantation home. And it's not a woman that is the leader of the family. So the first thing you see in this is that it is really very out of order. And these things, they have taught to our people during colonial slavery. We have mocked their ways. The scripture says, I'm going to send you as captives and slaves into a foreign land that you don't know, under a cruel Lord, but don't you learn any of his ways.
Right.
Well, we've taken on these things, and now we've brought them into our home. So our homes are also structured like this, where women are leading the family, and that is so out of order.
Well, one of the other things when you deal with children are their oppressors and women rule over them, you have laws that have been passed that tell you that you cannot discipline your kids. If you discipline your kids, if you whip your kids to a point that the government does not like, you can be imprisoned for that action. Yet the Bible says, he that does not chastise his child does not love his child. It says you spare the rod, you hate him. And it says discipline your child. It specifically says beat him with the rod, for he will not die, because he is instructed by the rod. He knows what is right and wrong based upon how he is disciplined. Now, the nations will love for you not to discipline your kids, because they already have a nice prison system that is waiting to discipline that kid for you. And that just even dealing with that prison system, it was really set up here in America to be the second slavery. If you research this whole industrialized prison system, it came to be right after slavery, and it was a direct way of holding our people. So it was made for that purpose.
Exactly.
So the laws are passed, so you won't discipline the kid, so that kid has already been delegated for the prison system.
Right. And it really was, the history of it is that there was no prison system in this country until the Emancipation Proclamation came through. So this prison system was a way, the prison industrial complex and, convict leasing was a way to just put us back into prison, but, under that institutionalized kind of slavery that's not as overt as the rest of it, but it's the end result of having learned the ways of strangers, that we don't discipline our children, and now the prisons are just waiting for them, and that's a result of that.
Well, another one of the things that you can really get out of here is dealing with the house being out of order when you get to the original family. Because this entire thing, when we talk about the 12 tribes of Israel, it's all that comes out of one family. So Yahweh began everything as one family, and it shall end as one family. It shall be set up in righteousness as one family. But go into that original family of Adam and Eve. The family got off track as the instructions were given unto Adam as to what to do, but there came a little discord that was placed in the ear of the wife. The wife, Eve, then circumvented what was told to her husband, and instead of him setting himself aside to be a covering for his wife, he went along with her. So at that point, you have a true disruption of the family. And what it gets down to is what we have here in the nations, and it's goddess worship. He basically took on her thoughts and put them over the thoughts of Yahweh.
Right. And it's the original sin. It's the first thing that went wrong in the Garden of Eden. And here we are in the book of Isaiah, the middle of the book, and even into the New Testament. It's still the thing in modern history that's out of place. The woman stepped out of place and suggested things that Yahweh had not ordained. And of course, the structure that we're still in right now, and it's the thing that we're saying to our females, we're very important in the family structure. There's no one more important in the family structure than the woman. The woman came out of a man's rib because she's like his that's like what holds the body up. The rib supports the frame. And that's what a woman is to her husband and her household. But when you step out of that place, then you're not in the place where you're not functioning in the purpose in which you were created. And therein lies the problem.
Correct. Now I'm going to get into another part here. We're going to jump down to verse 16 here in Isaiah chapter 3. And it says, "Moreover, Yahweh said, because the daughters of Zion are haughty, and walk with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes, walking and mincing as they go, and making a tinkling with their feet. Therefore Yahweh will smite with the scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion, and Yahweh will discover their secret parts. And that day Yahweh will take away the bravery of their tinkling ornaments about their feet, and their cauls, and their round tires like the moon, the chains and the bracelets and the mufflers, the bonnets and the ornaments of the legs, and the headbands and the tablets and the earrings, the rings and nose jewels, the changeable suits of apparel, and the mantle, and the wimples, and crisping pins, the glasses, and the fine linen, and the hoods, and the veils." And this lets you know that Yahweh is bringing about a humbling of to the daughters of Zion, because he says, because the daughters of Zion are haughty. This is what starts verse 16. And then all the other things below that are the things that he's going to remove from the daughters of Zion. And we see that that is to humble them.
It is. These things, you know, we've had a couple of questions about that from females about the adornment and that sort of thing. And we find in Ezekiel 16 where Yahweh actually gave us these things, you know, to adorn ourselves and to beautify us in simplicity. But what we've done is taken these things and we've put our trust, confidence, and faith in the outward adornment of things. And they have become more important than the inward man and the inward woman. You know, even in Revelation 21, Yahweh refers to the church, which is also used as a model of, you know, the woman is representative of the church. And it talks about in the end, the church being adorned as a beautiful bride awaiting her husband. So, you know, Yahweh gave us beautiful things to adorn ourselves, but we're told that is not the concentration on these outward things while you neglect the inward person.
Correct. That's a very good point. And when you talk about this thing, the daughters of Zion are haughty, you have to consider the things that we hear most of the time. There's the chant of the independent woman.
Right.
And when you get to how things have come through this colonial slavery, even when you, back in the days, there used to be a thing where the insurance man would come directly to the house. Now, of course, they were taking our people for a lot of money. But you notice one thing about the insurance man. He never dealt with the man of the house.
Right.
He always went to the woman. So even when our grandmothers and grandfathers were still together, the insurance man, who would be a Gentile, would come to the house, and his respect part would only be to that woman, not to the man. Thus, remember the whole term, boy. So when you go back to the earlier part of Isaiah 3 and talk about the children ruling over us, then they would even give the male a term as boy while respecting the woman when they came to the house.
What's key about that is just the purpose. You know, they have taken a woman's purpose. A woman was created as an administrator, you know, one to support the male as a helpmeet. So all of these, you know, many balls that we juggle, we were given the ability to do those things because it was in support of the male and the family life. What colonial slavery did was recognize the importance of the black woman and how they could use her to further circumvent the black male. You know, now we've taken her and made her an independent woman where, you know, she was taken as a rib from a man's side to be created, but now she doesn't need the man. You know, it's that sort of thing where colonial slavery and that commerce that we were made, you know, I've heard people say that one of the most important things to, you know, people in commerce, in particularly, you know, Gentiles, is a black woman who understands her role as an administrator because she was so vital in keeping the home going. But it was the thing where many of our women in the past used that advantage to bring those advantages home to help the family, as opposed to, you know, now you're making the salary and you're arguing with your husband as to who wears the pants in the family. So those things are out of order. You know, our women used to use those things to our advantage.
Correct.
Those are the things that we have to get back to doing and elevating our people and our families.
Well, you know, what we have to deal with is that there's a taught practice of separating from the people of lower class. And what happened as our women were invited to corporate America, they were then told that they should not fraternize with the lower people.
Right.
And of course, the men originally would have the lower jobs as they would bring the women into doing those things. Then all of a sudden, see, there's this separation in every company. They have a separation between management and workers.
Right.
And if you ask almost any business owner, how did you get to do the business that you do? They will reply to you, oh, I did this at another company. So what they do when they start their business is make sure that that information is not able to be passed on from department to department. So the best way to do that is to separate the departments. Now, you may be able to separate the departments with a wall or a hall, but you can really separate the departments if you can separate them here.
That's right.
If you can make management believe that they are so much better than the worker, that they don't need to fraternize with the worker, you have now limited your liability. Why? Because the management has all the paperwork on how the job is marketed, what the specifics are to the product. Well, the worker, but they still don't know how to build it. The worker knows how to build it.
Correct.
So if you allow those people to keep talking to one another, they will eventually be able to start their own company.
That's right.
So separation is essential in corporate America. So we took the essential separation of corporate America and brought it home to our families.
That's right. And we see that coming forth in the prophecies about us as, you know, in the valley of the dry bones, as these individuals who are disjointed and broken. And that's because we are, you know, we came into this country and now we're segregated, you know, we're independent individuals. You know, it's no longer about family, and it's no longer about, you know, lifting us up as a community. And it's the thing that has caused us to actually suffer the way we're suffering now because of the way we're living. You know, we've learned the ways of strangers, and we have to get back to those things that made us whole.
Okay. Well, I want to read something else. We want to get to, I want to go to Psalms 83, and we're going to read something right out of that. Psalms 83, and we're going to start that at verse 1. Keep not thou silence, O Elohim. Hold not thy peace, and be not still, O Elohim. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate you have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against your people, and consulted against your hidden ones. They have said, Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against you, showing how the nations have come together to cut off the nation of Israel. Okay, verse 6, the tabernacles of Edom.
And those are the Israelis, the Ashkenazi Jews, the converts.
And the Ishmaelites.
Of course, and you know that's Ishmael, which was, you know, Hagar's descendant with Abraham.
Of Moab.
Moab is Lot's nephew, Lot's son, actually, Abraham's nephew, rather.
And the Hagarinis.
And we know that's Hagar's descendants.
Verse 7, Jebal.
Africa.
And Ammon.
The other son of Lot.
And Amalek.
Descendants of Esau, the Edomites.
The Philistines.
Africans.
With the inhabitants of Tyre.
Who were the Canaanites.
Asher.
Asher is from their Shem, but they reside in the land known as Turkey today.
Also is joined with them. They have helped the children of Lot.
So it's the thing of e pluribus unum, out of many nations, one. But these are not the things that, you know, we were told that we were going to do. This is how they have they have consulted together in one consent, you know, to actually destroy us. They're ways that our people have taken on. And, you know, one of the things that we mentioned that they've spread this culture around, you know, in causing us to assimilate or promoting the assimilation, is that our people now are heavy into interracial dating. And while that is not a thing in and of itself, it simply goes against the commandments that we were given in Numbers 36. You know, we were told as people not to marry from tribe to tribe.
Correct.
And that not only involved keeping the purity of the tribal seed, but it also involved the inheritance and the property in the land that was allotted to each one of those tribes.
Correct.
So if you marry from tribe to tribe, then the inheritance stays within the tribe.
Right, and that would cause an issue. So we know that going within all of these countries and the things that we've had to deal with, that we have had a lot of mixing, and we have heard things, if you have 1 ounce of black blood, you're black. Well, that's not according to what's written in the Bible.
Correct.
What determines your lineage is your father. This is what the male has the seed. This is why when that war system was moving across the plain, they murdered all the men. The women were then absorbed into the culture.
That's right.
Because all the children would belong to the male. So since it would be his seed, they would be what his lineage is. So we have to understand that there was a reason why the male was conquered, so that the woman could be just absorbed into the culture.
Exactly.
So, and that also goes back to, you read here about Edom dealing with the people who call themselves the Jews, and they will say that they are Jewish through their mother.
Right.
And there's no such animal in this book. If you read what people say that they believe in, which is the Torah is the first 5 books of Moshe, and you will find in there, it gives you strict guidelines that the seed follows the male.
Exactly.
So if all you deal with is the Torah, then you have to understand that the lineage comes through the male. So where does that come from, that I'm Jewish through my mother? That's not in this book.
No, it isn't. And it's the way you know that the people who are in the land today calling themselves the Israelites, even though they say Israelis, that's another clue, they're not actually the people of the book. There are so many things that you can pick out and which will actually show you and demonstrate that they're not the people of the book. They don't govern themselves based upon what is written in this book.
Well, when you deal with that separation, then what it then shows that our people have a separation that's coming toward us on a home level, on a real personal level. Then you have what was described here in this passage, a separation on a nationwide level of spreading out the children of Israel. This is why we have this battle of Armageddon that must happen. And Yahweh says, invite all the kings of the earth, invite all the nations, so that I may judge them for the controversy of Israel.
Right.
So when you deal with the controversy of Zion, then that means you're dealing with the controversy of all those who have helped to part his land.
That's right. That's exactly right. And destroy his people. On top of that, they've claimed, our identity. They're actually walking around in our identity, and our people are blinded to these things.
And you can't get any deeper on separation than a people who has been blinded as to who they are and will allow someone else to walk in their inheritance.
Well, it's actually, and you see that dual prophecy that you just mentioned coming forth in the Isaiah that we read, the daughters of Zion. That's an individual prophecy about our women, but it's also that brokenness of the daughters of Zion, who are the descendants of the ancient Hebrew Israelites. That's us as a nation. So it's talking about our brokenness as a nation of people and how we've assimilated, and now all the outward adornment and the things that we should not be given that much stock to, we're actually counting on these things and living our lives for these things rather than understanding who we are and what we need to do to and for the inner person.
Well, we have to state too that, coming out of Egypt, there were mixed multitudes that did come out of there, and we know that our people have gone through things. What we will have to understand is that when that kingdom is set up, whatever Yahweh has allowed up to this point, you cannot believe that you can keep walking in that. Yahweh has now set up, when he sets that kingdom back up, you're going to have to walk and deal within that tribal setting, and it will go dealing with your father. Whatever Yahweh has allowed, that's what he has allowed to that point.
That's right.
You need to understand what the guidelines are to walk further. You can't believe that because he has allowed us to do all of these things in the daughter of Babylon, that he's going to allow us to keep doing those things. We have guidelines. So we will have to move forward, but we will have to move forward decently and in order. And that order is contained in this legacy.
Correct.
Okay, I'm going to read something to you in Proverbs chapter 31, and we're going to start at verse 10. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband does safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and works willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She rises also while it is yet night and gives meat to her household and a portion to her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. She girds her loins with strength and strengthens her arms. She perceives that her merchandise is good. Her candle goes not out by night. She lays her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. Now, we can go on and on these things, and it's very interesting. What we hear more of in today's society is the whole chant of an independent woman. We don't hear chants about the virtuous woman.
And that's unfortunate, because this is an apt description of what a virtuous woman and an administrator is. And if you notice, it's describing all the things that she's involved with in and around the home, but then it even moves further out into the community, and she's involved in business, and she's involved in commerce, and she's involved in helping others. So it gives you that whole administrator, well-rounded picture. But this is, what the scripture refers to as a daughter of Sarah versus the daughters of Eve. We don't want to be women who are out of place. We have all of these gifts, and we were given these things by design, on purpose, intentionally, to help ourselves, our children, and our husbands. So these are gifts that, Yahweh intended for us to use, but they have to be used in the place and for the purpose that they were given.
You mentioned something when you talk about having those things used in that place. Just reading this brings back to mind that old time life. It says that she rises while it is yet night. I remember my grandmother being up before. When you got up, grandma was already up.
Exactly.
And I'm talking both of my grandmothers. Not one, both. Whenever I was over there, they were up. Now you have, this newfound woman that, I actually watched a television program where the woman said, I'm fine with getting up in the morning as long as it starts at noon.
Well, see, and it's the culture that we live. We've gotten away from all of the things that were important. Everything in the past, and even in the family in which I grew up, used to be centered around the family. Everything happened in the kitchen around the family, where, the daughters were learning the trade of the kitchen and how to, prepare meals and these sort of things, in that setting, what you're doing it under your mother and your grandmother. But now we're so separate, and we're so segregated that, women are coming up without this training, and you find women that, they're not really apt in moving around in the kitchen. We tend to like fast food. Not only do we do it out of convenience, but we do it because we don't know the other way.
Correct.
Those old ways are gone, and it's these things that have disadvantaged our people in families. The family is the core unit that actually, promotes a society in its success.
Correct.
So if your family structure is breaking down, then society structure is just as warped. And we can see that as we look out in the news today.
Well, and we have to deal with going into all of this. It's not a situation where we can just say that it was slavery's fault or the white man's fault. This, when you get down into here, you read Deuteronomy 28, Yahweh told us that he was going to do these things if we did not walk in his commandments. So this is Yahweh's doing unto us why we've had to endure these things. And you can see it right now just as plain as day. You go into these Sunday churches, and you will find the art of tithing pushed, but you won't hear anything else about any of those commandments. You won't hear about the Sabbath day, even the thing about, not bearing false witness. It has been led to us for us to believe that it is of our own goodness that we don't do these things. No, these things are Yahweh's law. The law was not nailed to the cross. Okay? So it's these things, not walking in these things, is what brought that disciplinary action upon us. Now you understand why Yahweh said, discipline your child.
Right.
See? So this disciplinary action that we're enduring now is because our people would not walk in the statutes that were given unto us. Right. And it has a specified end. But you also understand, as when we read Isaiah 3, why those things had to happen to us to lead us back. When you talk about the convenience of fast food, being able to run down at the corner store and grab something to eat, it gets you to a point where you have to depend on Yahweh less and less. So for Yahweh to bring us back to him, there are some things that he is going to have to take away from us.
And you made a good point, just to mention, to the rest of our listeners who may not be of our nation, is not a thing of black and white and that sort of thing, but these are the tough issues that are part of our history that we have to discuss. Part of our problem is that we've stopped talking about these things, and we've stopped pointing out, where did we go wrong? It's the solution to a problem. You can't correct something if you fail to point out exactly where we went off track. Right. So these are issues. These are household issues, house cleaning issues that we have to really discuss amongst our people and cause them to understand.
And the answer is right here, walking in the culture that was given unto us. This is our culture. This book outlines how we are supposed to walk, how we're supposed to treat one another, how we're supposed to conduct ourselves in worship, ceremonial observances. It has our holy days in here. It outlines which day we're supposed to worship. The Sabbath is given unto us within this book. So it doesn't matter how many gatherings we have, how many forums or whatever, until we get into the culture that Yahweh has left unto us, then our families will continue to be broken. If we want our families fixed, then we're going to have to deal with this book not as it is dealt with on Sunday morning. You're going to have to deal with this book as it was given unto the Gentiles. The book was given unto the Gentiles through the apostle of the Gentiles. And that apostle was Apostle Paul or Saul, and he was a Hebrew Israelite. And he kept the holy days. He left from among them to go and keep Pentecost. Okay, so he never believed that the law was nailed to the cross. He was still keeping all of the things that were set forth other than animal sacrifice. He was keeping all of those things after the birth, death, and resurrection of the Messiah. He's still keeping these ordinances about the ceremonial practice, the keeping of the holy days. All of these things are contained in this book. Well, that's all we're going to do for today's program. We pray that you guys are able to really grow from this, and Yahweh's will. We'll see you next time. Shalom. What's up? I know this is going to sound a little strange, but I really need to holler at you about some things. And I know it seems kind of hypocritical because you know my past and all the things that I've been through, but I mean, just listen.
I really wish, I really wish that you could see how sister. I really wish that you could see how much you mean to me. Oh, you mean to me. You can't achieve, my little sister.
I remember the days of the youth. I never had to check behind you. All you told was truth. We were young. I ain't know your body wasn't like mine. Disappeared for a time, reappeared so fine. I'd be lying if I told you that I didn't stare. And I'd be tripping when I try to act like I don't care. You know my past, so I know you're saying I can't talk. Cause I done left them slayed and played, outlined and chalk. But I never even knew what I wanted. I just ran up on them because they flaunted. If it's built upon vanity, then it won't last. Viewed as only skin deep, eventually it passes. Tell me, how can someone that's built like a brick house have a self-esteem lower than a sick mouse? You're overly impressed with mess. Please stop. You're giving very shady people the keys to your life.
I really wish that you could see how much you mean to me. Oh, you can't achieve, you're my little sister. I really wish that you could see how much you mean to me. Oh, you mean to me. You can't achieve, my little sister.
Wanna be what you see on that damn TV. Wanna drop that, pop that, hoping I'ma clock that. Mommy, please slow down. Wanna be Miss Right or Miss Right now? Childhood issues done followed you into womanhood, causing yourself so much pain. But think it's all good, you ain't gotta tell me. I know it feels so real. The lust of the flesh got you fiending for sex, forgetting everything you was taught. Wanna talk that talk and walk that walk. Wanna be in the in crowd, so now you're scheming. Picture that an angel of light communing with demons, committing atrocities that you know ain't right. Wanna be amongst the darkness, so you hide the light. Please slow down, you're spreading yourself way too thin. Leaving the door wide open and let everybody in.
I really wish that you could see how much you mean to me. Oh, you can't achieve, you're my little sister. I really wish that you could see how much you mean to me. Oh, you mean to me. You can't achieve, my little sister.
This is a letter to my little sister. I'm going all out cause I do miss her. And I'm begging you to come back home. RESPECT is all gone. You can take it or leave it, plait it or weave it. But it is what it is. You get it how you live. The quest to be independent got you going in the zone, thinking you can conquer the world all alone. If I say independent, ladies, it'll be a ride in here. When I say well, my virtues women, it get quiet.